From Jon Jones's multiple doping scandals, to Rousimar Palhares getting a lifetime ban for constantly breaking conduct rules, here are some UFC fighters who were famously caught cheating and got punished for it. Now, you've likely heard about Jon Jones's history of being a total rule breaker. You'd think that a fighter of his caliber wouldn't need to resort to unfair tactics, but as it turns out, even the best can have their moments. Jones's tale takes a dramatic turn with an incident that rocked the MMA world. It all began shortly after UFC 182. This was when he tested positive for cocaine. Because of this little oopsie, he ended up losing his highly coveted light heavyweight title, sending shockwaves through his career and reputation. But let's just say, that was just the start of a pretty bad year for poor old Jones. It's like they say, cheaters never prosper. In the following months, he was involved in a serious accident that led him to take a one-year hiatus from the octagon. He returned to claim the interim title, showing that his skills remained sharp despite his setbacks. But history was all too eager to repeat itself. Jones found himself in hot water yet again when he failed another doping test. This time, the consequences were even worse for the guy. He was stripped of his hard-earned belts, handed substantial fines, and slapped with another year-long ban from the sport. Ouch! While these suspensions undoubtedly had a huge impact on his career and performance, there's no denying Jones's natural talent. It definitely left his fans unsure of how they should feel about him. One thing is for sure, he's got an undeniable ability. But then again, he's constantly getting into trouble because of doping issues, so it's hard to feel too bad for him. And hey, the same can be said for this next fighter. Yup, I'm talking about Nick Diaz. Now, don't get me wrong, this dude is a massive powerhouse in the octagon, but he definitely loves sabotaging his own career. Nick's time in the octagon has been marked by a series of controversial decisions. I mean, sure, Diaz might be a force to be reckoned with in the cage, but some might say he's not always the sharpest tool in the shed. His professional record is stacked with achievements, but it's also riddled with actions that any fighter should steer clear of. From frequently skipping media events and even fights, to various scandals beyond the confines of the cage, Diaz has been no stranger to controversy. But the most significant storm in his career brewed back in 2015, when he found himself in hot water after failing multiple drug tests. And considering all his past antics and straight-up bad attitude, looks like some folks had had enough. The Nevada State Athletic Commission decided to step in, and they threw the book at him, imposing a colossal $165,000 fine and handing down a whopping 5-year suspension. Now, it's crucial to note that this suspension wasn't solely due to his use of marijuana, it also came as a response to his overall behavior. Of course, in typical Diaz fashion, he didn't hold back in sharing his thoughts. He claimed that they were simply afraid of his rise to the top of his career. But that statement didn't exactly win him many supporters, especially because people felt like he was being a cheater for failing the drug tests, even if all he did was use marijuana. This next fighter definitely did a lot worse, though. I'm talking about Alistair Overeem. Overeem's meteoric rise to fame came on the heels of his victory. That forced the legendary Brock Lesnar into retirement. This win was so incredible, it basically catapulted him to stardom, making him a household name. For a while, it looked like nothing could go wrong for the guy. I mean, he was even granted a coveted spot on the main card at the highly anticipated UFC 146 event, setting the stage for his championship battle against Junior Dos Santos for the heavyweight title. The stakes were high, the fans were buzzing with excitement, and then suddenly it all came crashing down for Overeem. Turns out the thrill turned into disbelief when the Nevada State Athletic Commission dropped a bombshell that stopped everything for the UFC star. It was revealed that Overeem had failed a pre-match drug test. Fans were left in disbelief, and the situation was made even worse by the revelation that his testosterone to his epitestosterone ratio was a staggering 14-to-1, far exceeding the acceptable limits. Things didn't look too good for him after that. Overeem was stripped of his spot in the title fight, and he faced a substantial 9-month ban from all upcoming tournaments and matches. The fight that was supposed to be the night's main event, Overeem versus Dos Santos, was relegated to disappointment. UFC owner Dana White worked tirelessly to rescue the event by substituting Frank Mir for the disgraced fighter. But despite these efforts, the damage had been done, and this incident lingers as one of the most infamous cheating scandals in the history of the UFC. That said, this next fighter can certainly compete with Alistair in terms of sheer controversy. After all, it's Anderson Silva. The legendary Brazilian fighter, despite his extensive time in the UFC spotlight, had a far from spotless career. His legacy is tarnished by not one but two doping scandals, which didn't do him any favors, not just because of the use of illegal substances, but also because of the downright horrible excuses he conjured to justify his actions. There was a time when the once undefeated champion found himself in the middle of a tough losing streak, facing a crisis in his career. Under the mounting pressure, he resorted to what any professional athlete should avoid at all costs: performance-enhancing drugs. But when the mandatory drug screening came around, the Nevada State Athletic Commission left no stone unturned, and it was revealed that Silva had tested positive for steroids. You'd think that in such a situation, someone would simply own up to their mistakes when faced with clinical tests conducted by professionals. But not Silva. Instead of admitting to the offense, he crafted one of the most far-fetched excuses you could imagine. He tried to persuade the NSHC committee that the Viagra pills he had taken in Thailand were responsible for the test results. Sheesh, at least he could have come up with a more believable lie. Unsurprisingly, the NSAC swiftly debunked this excuse, and the fighter found himself facing a suspension. Let's just say, Silva won't be taking more trips to Thailand anytime soon. And even if he does, he's going to be 100 steps away from any Viagra pills. Now, it's one thing to be caught before a fight happens, but TJ Dillashaw was caught cheating months after his match happened. Here's how it all went down. In his pursuit of becoming the third fighter in UFC history to hold titles in two weight divisions, UFC bantamweight champion TJ Dillashaw set his sights on then flyweight champion Henry Cejudo. The two were set to appear in a much-anticipated super fight back in 2019. Sadly for Dillashaw, the fight ended just as dramatically as it started, with Cejudo securing a victory by TKO in a mere 30 seconds. But let's just say, that wasn't the hardest blow dealt to TJ, because several months later, a shocking revelation came to light. Turns out Dillashaw had tested positive for recombinant human erythropoietin, more commonly known as EPO. This is a hormone notorious for its ability to boost the production of red blood cells in the body. Dillashaw's claim was that he had turned to EPO because he had become anemic due to an extreme weight cut to reach the 125-pound flyweight limit. But of course, no one was buying it. And let's just say, it didn't end well for him. He was stripped of his hard-earned title, and he had to accept a harsh 2-year ban from the world of mixed martial arts. The consequences of his actions not only shattered his legacy, but also cast a permanent shadow over his reign in the bantamweight division. That said, it's not even like he got any good use out of the drugs. The dude was passed out cold 30 seconds into his fight anyway. But hey, the rules are the rules. Finally, there's one other UFC fighter who deserves a mention on this list of cheaters, and that's Rousimar Palhares. Throughout his relatively short career in the UFC, he managed to accumulate a laundry list of rule violations, making him possibly the UFC's most infamous rule breaker. While he did have his share of issues with banned substances, Palhares is mostly known for constantly breaking the rules. The dude's aggression often crossed the line, with one particularly shocking incident being an eye-gouging episode involving Jake Shields. But what truly set him apart were his actions inside the octagon. He had a troubling habit of refusing to release submission holds, even after his opponents had tapped out or referees had intervened. Despite repeated fines, penalties, and punishments, Palhares straight up refused to apologize for his actions, even though they posed serious risks to his opponents. It was clear that he showed a blatant disregard for the safety of his fellow fighters. This pattern of behavior eventually led to the UFC taking extreme action, banning Palhares for life in 2015. Not only did he face a lifetime ban, but he was also fined and stripped of the title he held at the time. And honestly, good riddance. So from Rousimar Palhares getting a lifetime ban for constantly breaking conduct rules, to Jon Jones's multiple doping scandals, those were some UFC fighters who were famously caught cheating.